Republican leadership just turned on their own president at midnight. 43 members of the House GOP caucus signed an emergency letter calling for an immediate vote to censure Donald Trump. This isn't some procedural maneuver or symbolic protest. This is an internal party revolt sparked by documents so explosive that even his closest allies couldn't stay silent. When the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee stands before cameras at 1 a.m. and publicly breaks with his own president, something catastrophic has just rocked the foundation of the Republican Party. Hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss any of the videos I release. So what triggered this unprecedented fracture? Sources familiar with the documents say they reveal a coordinated effort to pressure state election officials into manipulating certification timelines for the 2024 election. The materials allegedly include recorded phone calls, internal memos, and encrypted messages showing direct involvement from senior White House staff. This isn't just another political controversy or partisan talking point. Members of the same party are joining together to publicly condemn a sitting president from their own ranks. And believe me, when Republican committee chairmen break ranks like this, you know something enormous has just detonated. It's honestly hard to believe we're watching elected officials from the same party turn against their president in a way we haven't seen since Richard Nixon faced his own party's ultimatum in August of 1974. Here's the full picture of what's been unfolding. Tensions within the Republican caucus have been building for months, fueled by concerns over executive overreach, clashes with conservative legal groups, and repeated conflicts with state-level party officials who felt increasingly marginalized by Washington decision-making. But everything escalated according to reports from January 11th when a collection of internal documents was provided to the House Oversight Committee by a whistleblower inside the White House counsel's office. The documents dated between November 2024 and January 2025 reportedly show a systematic campaign to delay electoral certification in 3 contested states until specific conditions were met. This wasn't about legitimate legal challenges or standard election procedures. It was about using federal authority to manipulate state-level processes for political advantage. Smash that like button if this is making sense so far. Here's where it really gets serious. When members of the House Freedom Caucus reviewed the documents in a secure briefing room on Capitol Hill, they recognized immediately that this crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. Sources who were present described the atmosphere as one of shock and disbelief. Lawmakers who had spent years defending this president sat in stunned silence as they reviewed page after page of evidence. And let's be honest for a moment. Internal party revolts of this magnitude are extraordinarily rare. They don't happen over policy disagreements or legislative disputes. They happen when lawmakers believe their own president has fundamentally betrayed the principles they swore to uphold. Here's what multiple sources say happened next. On January 12th, a group of 43 House Republicans held an emergency closed-door meeting in the Rayburn building after reviewing the whistleblower materials. The group included 28 members of the Freedom Caucus, 9 moderates from swing districts, and 6 senior committee chairs. Sources told reporters that Representative James Comer, chairman of the House Oversight Committee, reportedly stated that the evidence was undeniable and that remaining silent would make them complicit in a constitutional violation. His exact words, according to 2 sources present, were that they had a choice between their careers and their oaths, and he knew which one he was choosing. Meanwhile, Representative Chip Roy, a senior member of the Judiciary Committee, called the documents a clear betrayal of conservative principles and an abuse of executive authority that made a mockery of everything Republicans claimed to stand for. By the end of that 4-hour session, the group had drafted a formal censure resolution demanding immediate accountability, released publicly at 1:47 a.m. on January 13th. The resolution claims that constitutional duties regarding electoral integrity were violated by using federal resources to pressure state officials into altering certification procedures. Reporters who obtained the full text note the language is unusually direct for an internal party document. The resolution accuses the administration of undermining state sovereignty, corrupting the electoral process, and betraying the trust of Republican voters who expect their leaders to defend constitutional principles rather than circumvent them for political survival. The language is remarkable coming from members of the president's own party. Drop a comment right now if you saw this coming. I read every single one. Now things get absolutely wild. When those documents were reviewed in the secure briefing room, even the president's staunchest supporters couldn't defend what they saw. Representative Jim Jordan, who had defended this president through every prior controversy going back years, stood before reporters with visible frustration and read portions of the censure resolution himself. That's when it became clear this isn't just another political scandal that will blow over in a news cycle. The bombshell moment came as Jordan addressed the assembled press at 2:15 inches the morning. Reporters present say his voice carried an unmistakable edge of disappointment as he delivered the key passage from the resolution. He explained that as a constitutional conservative who had supported this president through impeachment proceedings and countless investigations, who had staked his reputation on defending this administration against what he believed were partisan attacks, he could no longer remain silent in the face of evidence showing the executive branch pressuring state officials to compromise electoral integrity. This move sent shockwaves through Washington that are still reverberating. When a Republican like Jim Jordan publicly breaks with a president he has defended for nearly a decade, it signals one thing with absolute clarity. The evidence is so damning that political survival now depends on distancing oneself rather than defending the indefensible. The claims of a partisan witch hunt collapse entirely when the president's own loyal allies are leading the charge for accountability. There's no spinning this as a Democratic plot when Republicans are the ones holding the press conference. This isn't the first time pressure has built for action against a president over abuse of power. Think back to Richard Nixon and the Saturday Night Massacre when he fired the special prosecutor investigating Watergate. Republican senators began privately telling Nixon he had lost their support. The pressure grew so intense that senior GOP leaders went to the White House and told him directly that he couldn't survive an impeachment vote. Nixon stepped down within days of that meeting. Then there was Bill Clinton during the impeachment proceedings of 1998. While he was impeached by the House, the Senate didn't convict. The key difference being that Clinton's actions, though inappropriate and dishonest, were largely confined to personal misconduct rather than systematic abuse of constitutional authority. The constitutional stakes were simply not comparable. Subscribe immediately if you haven't yet. This content doesn't exist anywhere else. And let's not forget the first impeachment in 2019 over Ukraine. Some Republicans privately expressed concern, but publicly they maintained unified support throughout the process. The party stayed together even when evidence of wrongdoing seemed clear to many observers watching the proceedings. Now, however, it's different in ways that matter fundamentally. This time, Republicans are publicly joining the call for accountability. The pattern throughout American history is clear. When presidents abuse power in ways that threaten constitutional foundations, even their own party eventually reaches a breaking point. Political loyalty alone cannot hold indefinitely when the stakes involve fundamental principles. So what allegedly triggered this unprecedented reaction? According to legal and constitutional experts who reviewed summaries of the whistleblower documents, the actions violated fundamental principles of federalism and electoral integrity. The materials reportedly show personal calls from senior White House officials instructing state secretaries of state to delay certification proceedings. These weren't routine communications about procedural questions. Sources familiar with the documents say they involve explicit pressure tactics tied to federal funding considerations and political appointments. Here's the kicker. The documents reportedly include explicit language stating that certification delays should continue until specific state officials agreed to initiate additional review procedures that had no legal basis under state law. This wasn't a policy debate about election security or legitimate concerns about verification procedures. It was a clear attempt to use federal leverage to extract compliance from state officials who had already certified their results through established legal processes. Don't go anywhere. The most explosive part is coming next. And here's what should alarm everyone, regardless of party affiliation. This isn't just about one set of documents or one isolated decision made in the heat of a contested moment. If a president can pressure state election officials into altering certification timelines using federal authority, electoral integrity becomes a bargaining chip for executive power. Once that precedent is established in our system, there's no returning to constitutional normalcy. Every future president would have the template for manipulating electoral processes at the state level, and the guardrails would be permanently weakened. This puts Republicans in Congress in an extraordinarily difficult position with no good options available. On one side, They feel intense pressure to maintain support from a base that remains fiercely loyal and views any criticism as betrayal of the highest order. That means defending the president regardless of the evidence, attacking the whistleblower as a deep state operative, and framing the entire situation as another political witch hunt orchestrated by enemies within the government. On the other side, they are forced to reckon with actions that, according to their own committee chairman, violated the constitutional principles that conservatives have championed for decades. They now have to explain to their constituents why state sovereignty should be subordinate to executive convenience, a position that contradicts everything the Republican Party has historically stood for, going back to the founding principles of limited government. And here's the tricky part. There's no credible defense available that doesn't require abandoning either facts or principles. Either the documents are authentic, in which case the actions are indefensible under conservative constitutional theory, or they're fabricated, which would require believing that 43 Republican members of Congress, including the chairman of the Oversight Committee, are lying about what they reviewed in a classified setting. Neither option works politically. Legal and political analysts are calling this a constitutional crisis, unfolding in slow motion before our eyes. Jonathan Turley, a George Washington University law professor and frequent defender of presidential authority, told news networks that if the document's allegations are accurate, there were clear violations of federalism principles that conservatives should find deeply troubling. While the Constitution gives the president significant authority over federal agencies, that authority cannot be used to coerce state officials into compromising electoral procedures that are their sovereign responsibility. A former federal prosecutor who served under both Republican and Democratic administrations added that these actions could potentially violate federal laws prohibiting the use of government resources to interfere with state electoral processes. Pressuring state officials to delay certification using implied federal leverage isn't just an abuse of power in the political sense. It could constitute criminal violations of election integrity statutes that carry serious penalties. Do me a favor and slam that like button because it genuinely helps this video reach more people. Even conservative legal scholars who typically defend broad executive authority acknowledge that the allegations are extraordinarily serious and deserve investigation. They emphasize that while presidents have wide discretion in many areas of policy and administration, using federal authority to pressure state electoral officials crosses a constitutional line that should concern every American regardless of political affiliation. The principle of federalism exists precisely to prevent this kind of concentrated power. So let's break down what this could mean going forward. First, the political impact is immediate and devastating for party unity. There's now a formal internal party demand for censure that includes some of the most loyal defenders the president has ever had in Congress. While these demands carry no legal force on their own, their symbolic weight is enormous. They signal to other Republicans that breaking ranks is not only acceptable, it may be politically necessary for survival in moderate districts where voters care about constitutional principles. Before this resolution, many Republicans feared that any criticism could end their careers in primary elections against more loyal candidates. Now, respected party leaders have given them cover, potentially triggering a cascade effect of more lawmakers speaking out in the coming days and weeks. Second, it creates massive problems for the party's relationship with state-level officials across the country. Secretaries of state, governors, and state legislators across all 50 states are watching federal officials allegedly use pressure tactics to manipulate state electoral processes that they are sworn to protect. A survey conducted among Republican state officials after the documents emerged found that 71% expressed serious concern about federal overreach into state electoral authority, a staggering number for an administration that has positioned itself as a defender of states' rights and constitutional federalism. Finally, looking ahead, the broader political implications are profound and long-lasting. This changes the landscape for upcoming congressional elections in ways that strategists are still calculating. Every Republican candidate will face questions about whether they support an administration that allegedly pressured state officials to compromise electoral integrity. Opposition advertisements are already being prepared, featuring quotes from Republican members of Congress demanding accountability from their own president. This creates a wedge issue that goes beyond typical partisan divides because constitutional principles and electoral integrity have traditionally commanded bipartisan respect among voters across the political spectrum. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'm genuinely curious to see your perspective on how this unfolds. But beyond the immediate political fallout, this is really about fundamental constitutional principles that transcend any single election or administration. The relationship between federal and state authority is sacred in our constitutional system. It demands that executives respect state sovereignty and ensure that federal power is exercised within constitutional boundaries rather than used as leverage for political objectives. If a president can pressure state officials into altering electoral procedures through implied federal consequences, the entire framework of federalism is effectively compromised for generations to come. The implications for the presidency itself would be catastrophic. This scenario is causing sheer panic within Republican leadership at the highest levels. Reports indicate that senior Republicans held emergency conference calls throughout the night to determine their response strategy. Some argued for circling the wagons and attacking the whistleblower, claiming classified information shouldn't have been disclosed to members of Congress without authorization. Others insisted that the allegations themselves demanded a response regardless of how the documents became available to lawmakers. The party is fracturing in real time, torn between loyalty to a political figure and responsibility to address serious constitutional violations that strike at the heart of what Republicans claim to believe. Meanwhile, core supporters are absolutely furious at the Republicans who signed the censure resolution. Social media is flooded with calls to primary every lawmaker who broke ranks. They're being labeled traitors, establishment sellouts, and deep state collaborators. To the base, this is the ultimate betrayal. Proof that even Republicans can't be trusted to defend their president against what they perceive as coordinated attacks from all directions. Things escalated further when the president himself responded with a series of posts in the early morning hours. He called the censure resolution a hoax and a witch hunt orchestrated by Democrats and weak Republicans who had been compromised by the Washington establishment that has always opposed him. He claimed the documents were fabricated by intelligence agencies trying to undermine his administration from within, specifically naming several Republican Congress members who signed the resolution and branding them cowards and sellouts who would face political consequences in their next primaries. Stay with me. What comes next will completely change how you view the situation. Here's what makes it even more extraordinary. The president's own response essentially confirmed the seriousness of the allegations through its defensiveness. Instead of addressing the specific claims directly with evidence or explanation, the reaction was pure fury and personal attacks on the Republicans who broke ranks. When your defense consists entirely of attacking those exposing the evidence rather than disputing the evidence itself, you've already lost the substantive argument in the eyes of neutral observers. Legal experts immediately flagged the problem with this approach. Attacking Congress members for exercising their constitutional oversight duties while claiming the allegations are baseless creates an obvious contradiction that anyone can see. If the claims are truly without merit, why respond with such rage toward longtime allies who have defended you for years? The defensive posture only underscores the gravity of the accusations being made. This goes far beyond a single controversy or one administration's conduct. It's about whether a president can use federal authority as a tool for pressuring state officials to compromise electoral integrity. If there are no consequences for allegedly manipulating state certification processes through federal leverage, it signals that constitutional boundaries are secondary to political considerations. It's not just about one presidency. It's about whether the office itself has meaningful constraints regarding respect for state sovereignty and electoral integrity that future occupants will be expected to honor. If this blows your mind, hit that like button right now. Here's the situation as it stands. An internal group of 43 Republican House members has formally demanded censure of their own president after reviewing evidence of alleged pressure campaigns targeting state election officials. This is no longer just partisan politics as usual. It's about whether we accept federal authority being used to manipulate state electoral processes in contested elections. When Republican committee chairmen and Freedom Caucus members openly break with their own party's president over constitutional concerns, we've entered genuinely unprecedented territory in modern American politics. If there are no consequences, it sets a dangerous precedent for every future administration, regardless of party. Presidents could treat state electoral officials as subordinates to be pressured rather than independent constitutional officers to be respected. Keep a close eye on this story in the coming days. More Republicans are reportedly reviewing the whistleblower documents and weighing whether to add their names to the censure resolution. Legal teams are already discussing potential investigative pathways forward, and constitutional conservatives across the country are watching closely to see whether their elected representatives will prioritize constitutional principles over political loyalty when the moment of decision arrives. Before we go any further, smash that subscribe button so you never miss content like this. Here's where things stand right now. 43 elected Republicans just put their political futures on the line, declaring that their own president violated constitutional principles regarding state sovereignty and electoral integrity. Conservative voters are watching closely to see if constitutional boundaries matter more than political allegiance. Meanwhile, more Republicans are reportedly reviewing those whistleblower documents and deciding whether to add their names to the growing demand for accountability. This isn't just another news cycle that will fade away by next week. This is a constitutional crisis unfolding in real time before the eyes of the nation. What happens next could determine whether the principle of federalism has any meaningful protection from executive overreach at all. The evidence is documented. The demand has been made by members of the president's own party. Now we wait to see if constitutional accountability still holds any weight in Washington when political survival is on the line. The stakes have never been higher, the evidence has never been more documented, and the constitutional crisis has never been more immediate. Pause for a second and hit that like button if you're finding value in this coverage.